Hello again there, friends and fans. Raptor here, and welcome back to Call to Arms, Gates of Hell, Ostfront. For those of you wondering how to defend in the game, build defenses, set them up, and defend them, then this tutorial will be for you. I'll be planning on doing another one of these when the game releases and I have access to the map tools in order to make a giant battle and show how to attack and how to defend those defenses as well as attack them with opposing sides. But for now, I figured we'd go into multiplayer and basically play alone and show all the tools at your disposal for setting up a defense. This will help you out in single player if you're getting the game for the first time, or if you need to brush up on your skills because you're a little rusty, or if even if you're a pro, leave some tips down below on how to set up a defense, and we would all greatly appreciate that. So welcome aboard, thanks for subscribing, good to see you all here, and let's go ahead and get started. One of the primary things you need to know about defenses in this game is that trenches, barbed wire, and all obstacles are pretty much everything, but the question is, how do you build them and exactly where to build them? Well, we're going to go ahead and show that off right now. One of the important things to note about this game too is that a lot of things can be transported via truck. So if you go ahead and click on an AT gun, you can easily transport it and its crew on the back of the gun via a truck. So if you happen to have an engineering truck such as I do, which I've called out from the menu on the right side, we can transport these troops around very easily, as well as the AT gun, and get started with the defense. So let's go ahead and do that. Up ahead, there's a position that I think is nice and flat and open for defense for demonstration purposes, and even has a little bit of a river, which of course you would probably want to defend anyway, although in this game, light water doesn't really slow down troops or tanks, but of course if there was some sort of a major river, the enemy wouldn't be able to cross it. Troops may be able to swim, and that'd be a perfect place for a machine gun. We also have some partisans set up here, so we're going to go ahead and ask them to come over here, so that way we can start setting up our defenses. Now in this game, we can dig defensive trenches, foxholes. We can also set up AT hedgehogs, basically heavy anti-tank barriers, and barbed wire and mines for anti-personnel and anti-tank purposes. And there's more things at our disposal too, and like I said, we'll probably go into more detail in another series in the future when we have more things that we can call out a little bit more easily. We can cover things like, for example, medium and heavy anti-tank guns and weapons, and also mortars too. We'll go ahead and see if we can call one of those out as well, so we can show exactly how to use those and how to resupply them too. Well, good driving there, Ivan. The AI in this game is just like in Men of War, where instead of taking a clearly drawn-out road to the destination, it likes to get lost, I suppose. So, again, this game is early access right now, and is still being developed, though the AI will never be perfect like this. It always seems to needs to get educated and take 1-point turns rather than 14-point. Wow, okay, and so don't worry, that's fine. Okay, let's go ahead and say we've arrived perfectly with no mishaps whatsoever. We have ourselves what would be considered to be a pretty light AT gun. I've called out a gun here that is a little special weapon here at the bottom. You can see that there's all sorts of different special weapons we can call out. For example, the 203 B4M, and also a 100mm anti-tank gun, but we'll get to those later. For these purposes, just consider this gun to be any gun in the game that is an anti-tank gun. Alright, we're going to go ahead and disconnect by that. You can click on the gun and then click on the chain, and the chain will actually drop the gun, and you can go ahead and move the gun by double clicking the crew. So if you want to go ahead and double click, they'll move in any direction in which you like, and then you can also press the button down here, which is hotkeyed by R, in order to rotate the gun. So for these purposes, we're going to point towards the river. If we also hold right click, we can point anything in the direction that we want it to point. So for example, if there was a tank here and we wanted it to move, if the gun were a tank instead, that's exactly what we would do. Perfect. Alright, I believe this gun is kind of more of an artillery gun. It does have the capability of firing heat rounds as well as HE rounds, but it's kind of more of an AT gun that doubles as an artillery gun for this moment. We've also called out engineers separately from the engineering truck, so in this case we've called out field engineers and loaded them into this truck and replace the rifleman that traditionally drives it. Now, if we were playing as the Germans, the situation would be fairly the same. For multiplayer, most things are kind of balanced that way. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at what the field engineers have, which makes them different from regular infantry. Here, the 5-kilogram trench pickaxe is what we need to dig the longer trenches, and down here in the lower right corner, you see the emplacement options. If we click on that, you can see everything from placing small barricades, big barricades, barbed wire, tank barriers, small foxholes, large foxholes, and something that I haven't yet toyed with, which is medical rally points. We'll have to see exactly how that works here in the future. But for now, we can go ahead and dig a large foxhole, otherwise known as a trench, really, and try to set those up. Now, as you can see, when we click on it, it'll show us exactly what it looks like. And if we hold right-click, it'll deselect that. So if that's not what we want, it'll get rid of it. But if we want to choose this, we want to go ahead and get real close to the ground and take a look at where it would be beneficial to set up. Now, it's kind of hard further away to tell what the ground looks like. To us, this kind of looks flat, and that anywhere would be a great spot. Except for now, we can see that the gun is somewhat behind a ridge here, so that it's not really the greatest position for it to direct fire on enemy troops. But I think we'll move it a little closer, and also the trench a little closer to the river. So you can see there's kind of like a, like maybe a very small angle to this trench. It's not a straight line. It's got maybe a 5-degree bend in it, and we can go ahead and put these side by side to cover two positions. So we can kind of cover this position here. So we can cover anybody trying to get across this side of the river. And we're going to do the same with the other troop here. We're going to go ahead and select his trench tool. And we're going to dig in on the other side of him, right about here, and see if we can start digging in with both trenches. I want to try to put them a little further away from each other, just so they're not as crowded. There we go, something like that. Now, it won't look perfect, but it will definitely do the job. You can see the bar below them filling up. The white bar is their health, but that little yellow bar is their progress towards completing the trench. The smaller the trench, the shorter the job. So if we take any of these other partisans that we've called out and ask them to dig a normal trench, a foxhole if you will, that'll be a lot faster, but keep in mind that really only holds maybe 1 or 2 people, so it's nothing like an actual trench. Now, we can't dig out large trenches. We cannot dig out large trenches for mortars. But what we can do is try to keep our mortar behind that ridge, like you saw before, and try to at least conceal it from direct fire. It means it'll be a little harder for a sniper or a rifleman or an HE round fired directly at it to fire at that weapon. Now, the good thing about setting up a position like this means that perhaps we could try to set up maybe a machine gun in here, a light machine gun with somebody carrying it. And as you can see here, the silhouette from the troop shows up to show exactly how they'll stand in the trench, and then you right-click to tell them to go there. So if we try to get a machine gunner over here, which we can get from the individual soldier tab, the top one is squads, the second is specialists and individual soldiers, such as auxiliary detachment, which is basically just a few riflemen. Here we can buy AT if we need, or AT miners. We're going to call a few of those up so we can do some more demonstrations here, and also AP miners, but we'll also call up a machine gunner, which should allow us to place a machine gunner or 2 inside these trenches. Now you can see that our machine gun that'll be set up in the trench can fire on all this clear ground here, and so if the Germans get anywhere near us on this side of the river, we should be able to open up on them pretty easily. Not to mention the mortar is pretty well concealed. They should still be able to shoot at it, but not as easily as they would if it were on open ground. Some of these weapons also have the ability to build additional entrenchments, so keep an eye out for that one. You should be able to basically select something in this gear, and sometimes you can put barriers or something in front of them, like sandbags, to stop direct fire from coming and hitting them directly. We'll go ahead and get some of these engineers on duty now, or rather partisans who are now engineers. As you can see, anybody can come over to this engineering truck. If you press X or X-ray, or if you click the examine tool on the mini-map or on the mini toolbar or whatnot at the bottom, you should be able to select the engineering transport and look inside. Here we can see some more trench pickaxes, so that allows more people to dig more trenches quickly. We also have these large anti-tank TMDB mines, and we also have these AP mines, anti-personnel mines. So anti-personnel mines can detonate if a vehicle drives over them. So if a light half-track or something drives across them with wheels, it might possibly damage or blow off the wheel. And also if a tank drives over it, it'll disable the mine, so that way it can't be used by infantry to disable infantry or to kill infantry. So keep in mind, light things can be set off by these light mines, but the heavy mines, the anti-tank mines, can only be set off by a tank. We also have ourselves a mine detector too, so if we're trying to get through the enemy's defenses, we can do it that way as well. So that's kind of a useful tool. If we hit control, I think it allows us to take, or rather shift. If we take shift, we can take 1 at a time. So if we just wanted 5, we can go ahead and click and drag to have, let's just say 3 for now. We can have 3, or if we double click, it'll give us a full inventory of what we want. So let's go ahead and say our friend here is in charge of laying anti-tank mines at the front of the river. Now, meanwhile, our machine gunner should have arrived. So you can see the machine gunner and a rifleman come together in order to basically support him. So the MG support, as you see on the right side, comes with additional ammunition for that machine gunner. So if the machine gunner happens to be wounded or is killed, this guy can pick up the machine gun and continue the fight. And they can also trade the gun or trade ammunition as needed. Alright, back to mines. Now, if we wanted to place these mines, you can see at the bottom here, we have anti-tank mines. Anti-personnel mines will be indicated here. You'll see them a little bit later. But this kind of looks like a cake. And so there's a few different ways to place mines. My preferred way is to click and hold shift in order to place them individually, so that way you can get a big spread, and placing them in a staggered or a zigzagged pattern in order to get the most amount of distance out of them. If we hold left click, it'll deselect the soldier, and if we hold right click, it'll place all the tanks, anti-tank mines in a line like that. Now that's a little too close together for my taste, so the way I've always done it is by holding shift the entire time. So you can do a staggered pattern like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I always need to count because the number at the very bottom is exactly how many you need to place too, so you can see what area we can cover. So always try to keep a mental note of that, or at least try to monitor how many you're placing down. And you can see the amount of spread here. It's going to be quite difficult for a tank to cross through here without getting hit, but we can also layer that with another set of mines. Now, infantry mines can be placed the same, and here's some really dirty tricks about placing anti-personnel mines. If the Germans were approaching from this direction, let's say the west, which is back this way, and if they were heading east, which is this way, German troops, for example, would come through these fences here and might want to take cover against us somewhere perhaps in this trench or maybe behind this log over here. So one thing that we can do to play dirty is we can actually place anti-tank or anti-personnel mines here. Anti-personnel mines mean that if the Germans come up here to take cover, they've walked right into a cleverly placed minefield. And so they might take their machine gunner or a sniper or a very high-level troop and put it here. So instead of these being anti-tank mines, you can then take anti-personnel mines and do that. So let's go ahead and do that now with our other partisan. And we'll take a full stack. And anti-personnel mines are smaller than anti-tank mines, so you can carry much more of them. There's no weight limit for the soldiers, only an inventory limit. So keep in mind that your troops should be able to carry any sort of large shell. So you can carry like 10 flak 88 shells if you want to a large flak gun if you need to, without being over encumbered. It's not as realistic, but the inventory space does limit things, but at least it allows you to do something against the enemy. Let's go ahead and set up a machine gun now, too, while we're waiting. We'll call up a Dishka, which is a 1938 stand. We'll also bring up the Maxim, and we'll also bring up an anti-aircraft gun right here. Now, keep in mind that there's not really aircraft in the game for multiplayer, but it might be a good thing to call out. But it's typically on the battlefield for single-player missions. Back to our anti-personnel miner. So we're going to go ahead and place a few anti-personnel mines here by this tree, and anywhere that the Germans might walk as well. So any sort of narrow position. Sometimes they'll be cleared by tanks, like for example this whole fence could be blown apart by a maybe perhaps a artillery piece. But we can place all the rest of the mines in here, so if the Germans happen to walk in here or pass through or even try to defend this position, they're going to have what we call a bad time. Yeah, we're going to leave a little surprise for them. Now let's see, mortars too, by the way, can be resupplied just like any sort of AT gun, and anything can be resupplied in this game. So on the fourth tab down, you can see all these trucks and vehicles that we have at our disposal. There's some light vehicles in here, like for example the BA-6, which again is a vehicle that could have its tracks blown off by a mine, like an anti-personnel mine. We can call up a supply truck, but additionally, we can also call up an ammo crate. So that, carried by a few troops, can be brought over to the mortar, and that can give them supply. So you can see these two here carrying that supply box right over, and they should be able to drop it off, and that should supply anybody and anything. So that can go ahead and supply our mortar or our anti-tank gun, or even troops can come over to grab some rifle ammo, but it has a specific value to it. You can see here that it only carries 250 supplies, as where a regular truck, if we were to call up a supply truck, carries much more than that because obviously it's bigger. That carries 1,000. However, this is a much easier target for the enemy to hit. However, it does have benefits and disadvantages. Like, for example, it can also carry an AT gun to the front lines. So if we wanted to carry a much larger medium anti-tank gun, like one of these, we can definitely do that. And we can also tow things around with pretty much any vehicle. I think only tanks, very few tanks can haul anything. We'll go ahead and leave this here for now. We'll call up a medium-sized AT gun in just a moment. I forgot we're also capturing this, so we don't want to do that. Otherwise, we'll win. And I certainly don't want to... oh, darn. Now we're winning. Yeah, so points of the multiplayer, too, by the way, is to actually capture flags. Oh, good. I abandoned it just in time. So when you're capturing positions like this white dotted line is where we would have to attack. And so, again, if you're fighting over an area like this, it's a genius idea to place AP and AT mines anywhere that you can. Probably not as important in multiplayer because people might see you doing that because they'll keep an eye on positions, but definitely in single player it's a very viable tactic. Now we have our trenches here set up. We're going to try to set up some more trenches just to show all the different things that we can do. Let's also place some tank barriers around our mines so that way the German tanks have to maneuver through the minefield. If we place our tank barriers where the mines are not, it'll kind of force them to go through here and hit some of the mines. So they'll have to go through here, these positions between them where the mines could be, or we could place mines in between. Now over time, we could basically build the Maginot Line, and there's nothing the Germans can do to stop us except for maybe bunch of artillery. Another good idea too is that if for example you're playing in an urban map where there's a city, you could also go ahead and mine things like these fords where tanks might have to cross, or large bridges. So if you're in an urban area and the enemy has to cross a bridge, it might be a good idea to set up some tank traps on either side of the bridge. Keep in mind, if you need to advance, you're going to block yourself, but tank traps can be easily destroyed with TNT as well, which I believe our truck also has access to. So if we needed to blow through some German barriers, we could do the opposite by grabbing this, the satchel charge, and this can also blow through pretty much anything. If you wanted to blow a house out of the way, or hide an AT gun in a house, you can do that too. Or you can drive a tank into a house. Everything's pretty much destructible in this game. So if we wanted to, again, we can place a satchel charge here. And let's just say we wanted to place an AT gun here, so we can place the satchel charge down. It can also be thrown. You can destroy tanks that way. But engineering trucks come with the most. Let's see how this works. I'll be damned. So now we can go ahead and roll an AT gun in there if we want to. We could have done it easily many other ways. An anti-tank grenade or even a small grenade will work. But as you can see, it's a little more concealed. A regular player might not notice that. They might just see a house. But we could place a machine gun in here looking over the hill, and if the Germans try to flank this way, they're again going to have a bad time. Let's see if our machine guns arrived. Perfect. Alright, so we have our heavier machine gun here. This machine gun is a much larger caliber. Pretty close to, imagine it as like a 50 cal. It's a 7.62, so never mind on that. But it is much more heavy, I believe, than the Maxim, which is a, let's see here. Oh, it's a 7.62 as well. Interesting. I thought the Dishka in this game would be the larger variant, but I guess there is a difference to the two in the fire rate or perhaps durability of the gun or the ammo it might come with. So as you can see, again, as we double-click, the troops will carry this around, and it is wheeled because it is a heavier machine gun. So these are considered to be heavy MGs, as where the soldier here is considered to have what would be known as like a light MG, something that could be carried by a single man. In this, it's got to be a crew. So if we set the weapon down, you can see that they'll spin around and get it into place. And there's different things we can do to conceal it too. We could, again, put this into a foxhole if we wanted to. And we can try to conceal it that way. Let's see if we can actually do that. If we can dig a small foxhole, we might be able to set up a position for the machine gun. So let's see if we can get this crew out of the way here. And we'll try to set up something for them and also the mortar. See if it actually works. Let's go ahead and set up one here. We'll hold shift to do this. So that way we dig 1 and 2. And see if this actually works. This could give us concealment. This could also give us protection from, well, basically the enemy wouldn't see us. Also, mortars might be less likely to actually hit us and that type of thing. Alright, with all these troops here, again, it's advisable to spread out your troops like crazy. So don't put everybody in the trenches. Always put everybody around and nearby to stand by if they hit your trenches too. If the enemy is going to attack, you could always leave troops in the rear and reserve. Let's say on the other side of the road here. So that way if they bombard you and then start to attack, by the time the bombardment is over and some of your troops in the trenches have met an unfortunate end, you can have those reinforcements then rush out there right away as the Germans are starting to cross the river, and you can then fill in those reinforcements as quickly as possible. So that way, the remaining machine gun teams or whomever may still be alive can suppress the Germans advancing while the reinforcements are already in the defensive position. Now imagine if we had fortified this position in one of the flags. It would definitely make us a tough nut to crack with the reinforcements ready to flood in without having to come from the corner of the map. Let's see if this machine gun team can fit in here. If you press the E key, or if you go into what is known as the direct control, this is a great way to control everybody and make them just a little bit more effective by possibly throwing a AT grenade or AP grenade on your own, or getting a gun into positions such as this. So as you can see, it's not going to be so great for... This is a test here to see if you could actually do it. And there probably is a way to do this. There is more than likely a way to set this up. And in fact, if we set it up in reverse, let's just say we set it up this way, we could fire this way instead. So let's try to have that team swing around and point this way instead. So if we built the trench in the opposite direction, you can see here we can give them a little bit more concealment. The crew is able to sit down a little lower out of the ground, and it might make it much harder for a grenade that is thrown near them to actually explode and kill them. So if a grenade is dropped here, the frags might go up into the sandbags and not actually kill the crew or wound them much less. So that can make it a little bit more effective. So that's something that we've learned. So place those in reverse for machine guns like that, though the Maxim might fit, but the mortar crew certainly should. Of course, they need to just simply fire up into the air. So if we place our mortar crew here, two-man crew can easily fit inside that little trench. Now you'd think this is only good for machine gunners or only good for riflemen, but no. The mortar can easily fit in there and is now much more concealed and protected against blasts. Now we have our other machine gun up here. The Maxim machine gun is up in the house and is ready to go and can fire over this small little ledge, or at least I hope it can. We'll go ahead and get this crew to turn around. And again, I think in this game, buildings, when they're blown up, still have a little ledge to them. I don't know why, but it at least provides a little bit of cover. And as you can see, our crew should be able to shoot through the wall here. I hope so, anyway. Let's go ahead and see if we can get any closer to the edge. There we go. A little funky, isn't it? But as you can see, it actually works. So the crew should be able to fight, should be able to shoot over this and shoot anybody coming our way. So that's a good thing. But it looks like they can't shoot, so perhaps if it's too close to the edge. I'll have to experiment with this a little bit more, but these are good ideas and things that remain to be tested, or at least could be good theories and could be put to the test through multiplayer. And of course, the game is not completed either, so some of these things that we're testing that aren't working quite right could be updated a little bit later. Alright, so now as for suppression, another thing we can do in this game is if the Germans were finally ready to attack our positions and they were laying down and their artillery ceased, or if they're just going to attack because they don't know what's here, let's just say that they're coming towards us. One thing to do would be to lay down suppressing fire. Now, you can have your vehicles and your weapons auto-fire by having firing mode fire at will, so that way anything within our line of sight would be shot at by the machine gun crew or the mortar crew. If we go ahead and use this option here, the attack ground option, we can also just tell them to suppress in any position that we want, so guns will continue to fire in a position like that. And even if we can't see the Germans, we can still try to shoot at them. Now this gun has to have a little bit more direct fire, so it's not going to fire without my order. But as you can see, not a good idea, of course, to fire into your own troops, but tell that to the Soviets. This is a little bit more of a direct fire weapon, though, so it is good to put on some sort of elevated flat land, so this could be a little bit more effective maybe on this side of the trench. And we can tell the mortar crew to cease fire for now. You just click that, and they'll stop firing a little bit. Or actually, you can click the cancel button. That's much more effective. There we go. If they'll listen to me. There we go. Perfect. So the AT gun can be put more on the front lines, so that way it can engage tanks and infantry at a much longer range. The trenches can then defend anybody who tries to get close enough to the AT gun. AT guns are very effective too in knocking down groups of infantry if they're loaded with HE. In this case, it's a 76 millimeter versus the typical 45 millimeter of this gun. So something like that could really disrupt the German troops. So direct fire plus mortars plus machine guns plus the light machine gun plus riflemen plus the mines and barbed wire that we may have laid are going to be really effective. Now let's play some barbed wire too. Let's jump back a little bit to before the attack could possibly happen, and we'll grab one of our engineers. Now, barbed wire, of course, is very effective because it stops the enemy from running straight in. It can be easily destroyed by a tank driving over it or by mortars or artillery of any sense. But as you can see here, we can right-click and drag and lay a line of barbed wire. Now, in this case, it seems we can only lay down 5. It doesn't look like they give us very much, and it's kind of realistic to how much a individual soldier can hold. It looks like our troops here are equipped with some. We have our shovels and our trench pickaxes for these troops. I believe it's the wire cutters maybe that provides them the ability to lay barbed wire, because they'll have to, you know, put it down and then maybe clip it if it were in the back of a truck. And I don't think the truck actually provides us with any more barbed wire. Oh yeah, here we are. Wire cutters. So let's go ahead and see if that theory is true. So it doesn't look like we can actually do anything with the wire cutters at the moment. At least, let's see. We can repair vehicles, but I don't see an option to actually clip wires. Interesting. We'll have to see exactly what that, how that is done. But of course, we can spawn in the engineering groups individually by doing this. We can call in those field engineers from that individual menu, and these two will be equipped with the equipment again in order to continue to place more mines if we have a mining truck. But in this case, what's more important is the trench pickaxe that they get. A much more affordable option rather than calling in the full truck. Let's get ourselves a 76mm anti-tank gun. This is 3 in this case. And again, we can put this on the back of a supply truck. So if the battle was heating up and our troops just survived an attack, but we need a bigger gun and we need to be resupplied after taking some losses, we can have some additional troops come in. In fact, what's interesting is that a lot of these troops on the back of these guns, you really only need 2 to operate a gun. So if you're desperate enough and you need reinforcements for your mortar, you can take the crew of this gun, and when you arrive, only 2 of them are needed to operate the gun, and the other 2 could go to the mortar, for example, if it were damaged. Let's see how the AI does arriving here on another attempt. Another great weapon here is anti-aircraft guns. And anti-aircraft guns are really good for 2 main reasons. They're really good with dealing with anything early game. Light vehicles and infantry are devastated by these weapons because they're essentially a giant machine gun, an autocannon. And these things, 25mm, can slice right through the side of a tank, and they can also go right through infantry and or kill them with HE rounds that explode close to them. You're probably not going to see many planes, or if any at all, in multiplayer. But hitting close to the enemy with HE rounds, or destroying a truck with HE rounds or light vehicles, or piercing even up to a Panzer III with one of these bad boys is a satisfying feeling and is a much more cost-effective solution. Really a mix of a machine gun and also an anti-tank gun. Now keep in mind this is kind of more of an artillery version of it, but we'll bring up that Ziz 3 in just a moment. And that AI is going all sorts of crazy. He's going off the road, he's taking a 6-point turn through the to the fields. This is the ultimate position, too, by the way, for mortars, this type of position. And you can actually use these in the game, too. If you happen to be playing multiplayer and find a position like this, you can definitely use it to put a machine gun in, or perhaps a couple of troops, or even a light machine gun. And you can definitely lock down a position that way. So always use the pre-existing territories to your advantage. We're also going to call in a 100mm artillery gun, anti-tank gun, really, in order to see what that looks like. Though you can get the picture of anything basically Tiger tank or above can be dealt with quite easily with this gun. The gun you just saw before, the 76mm, that's better for Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs and Stugs and most German tanks. And the light AT gun, this anti-tank gun here, the 45mm, is pretty good against Panzer IVs and IIIs, though you're less likely to get a penetration without hitting the side or the weak points of a tank. It's quite hard to do when a tank is moving and when the crew is under fire. There's a lot of pressure to get the shot right, and sometimes it can lead to misfires and such. And by that, I basically mean that if you're commanding this yourself while the tank is moving, it can be quite hard to hit. And if the crew is taking hits too, and you're losing crew members, then you need to make sure you micromanage that AT gun to get the kill on the tank. So we've got quite a magnitude of anti-tank weapons, including the mortar. The mortar can also hit certain tanks at the top. For example, the Martyr 1. Any open-top vehicles can be devastated by a mortar and taken out, or possibly captured on your own. So keep that in mind, too. Now, flamethrowers are a great weapon to use against these trenches, and so that's why you want to kind of lay down barbed wires and stuff. We're going really overkill. What the hell's that noise? Oh, I think it was the AT gun setting up again. It was a weird noise. It sounded like a tiger growling. Well, let's move the AA gun over here. AA gun has a gun shield on it, which is these two steel plates here on either side. And this basically stops anybody from shooting small or medium caliber ammunition and killing the crew right away. But of course, if they're turned to the side, it's going to be quite difficult for them to protect themselves from machine gun fire this way if they're engaging in other positions. So always try to keep it pointed at the enemy. You can change ammunition types, by the way, in most guns by either double-clicking on the ammo. So you can choose the APBC, which is basically armored piercing, or HE, which is like anti-personnel and anti-light vehicle. And the crews will make that change for you. Additionally, you can press I or India, and you can double-click on those that way as well. Helpful for if you're trying to find an ammunition type quickly without cycling through. Some vehicles have 3 or 4 types of ammunition, too. The mortar, for example, I think in this game only has 1. These are all explosive rounds, but there should be smoke rounds, too. Though that's something that they can use, as well as flares and incendiary rounds and such, but we won't see those here today. And that at least simplifies things for some of you, which is totally great. Now, another good tip is that you can turn on and off vehicles so the enemy can't hear it. So our truck just arrived, and if we're trying to keep quiet so the Germans can't hear us, we can always click the turn engine off button. You'll need somebody inside the truck, but at least it does kind of stop the sound. And you can definitely listen in multiplayer to know what's coming. The Soviets were well trained in identifying German vehicles by their sound, so they could find out what they were and where they were inside of especially like an urban area. Again, if we click the gun, and if we click here, we can detach the gun from the truck, and the crew can push it into position. A double click will get them to move. Great. So again, look for elevated positions like this. You can kind of see it if you look closely like this. And another great tip, too, is I can't do this at the moment, but if you're playing single player, you can hit backspace. It won't work in multiplayer, but if you hit backspace, you can choose the speed, and that can really help speed you up in making decisions for your defense. Right now, we're running at setting 3, which is standard in the game. You can go up to 5 or go down to 1, and that will allow you to get a little bit more time to get all your guns right, to make sure that you've given all your orders, so that we can give orders while your crews are basically running. It allows you to do more with less time, or basically more with being in like bullet mode or whatnot. Okay, bullet time is what I mean to say. Right, I would love to show off an attack on this position now. Unfortunately, I'm not able to command the other troops unless we have access to the map editor, which we don't quite at the moment. But you can see all the little tricks here to try to depress the enemy, suppress the enemy, and eradicate the enemy if they happen to hit your defenses. Now, there's quite a few missions in this game where you will have to set up defenses on your own, and the weapons that you have access to are very subpar. They're going to have to basically lob Hail Mary shots into the enemy. And of course, you can always quick save too by going into escape and setting up a quick save every time that an attack begins until you get it right. And it's a great way to practice. And some of these missions are very replayable in this game, as well as Men of War or Call to Arms itself too. 3 great games that kind of share the same heart and soul, but have all sorts of different unique stuff to them too. Great addition, these trench digging options here, and very popular in the Rob's Realism mod for Men of War Assault Squad 2, which a lot of people really enjoy to set up defensive positions, and it really makes it more realistic to defend a position and have an enemy attack it. It makes investing in a defensive position more expensive, time and resource-wise, but also means that you might not have to put as many men there in order to defend it. We wouldn't need as many men here to defend. We can send these guys elsewhere to attack if we need to, because we're dug in so effectively. So if we wanted to attack, we can have these guys leave and just leave a few defenders behind with a machine gun, and so thus we can do more with less. A lot of the times in this game you will see defenses where they're very long trenches, but nobody's occupying them. Like, for example, these. Sometimes there'll be maybe like 50 men in a position like this, which sounds like a lot, but when you get everybody spread out by about 10 meters pointing in the same direction, and a few of them are on an AT gun, it really sets up kind of a good thought for how many men are needed to defend a position, and why sometimes it can be so difficult to capture a full position, not because of the amount of people there, but the distance that has to be covered inside the trenches. Now, a lot of the missions in this game will require you to go into trenches, so keep in mind flamethrowers are a great way to attack trenches, as well as mortars or radio operators. This game does allow for radio operators to be called out. I believe that would be a really good thing to call out if we could. I want to see if we got one. Grenade, motorized rifle. Oh, they got some other mortars. Another great weapon to defend with, too. You can get different size mortars, so make sure you use your special weapons. They're quite important. This one's a much larger mortar, and it has, it actually has the smoke mortars, too, and incendiary rounds, I believe, that I mentioned before. So there's actually three different types of ammunition here that can help your attack or your defense, too. If you lay down smoke, you might be able to cover a defensive reinforcement or something like that. If you have troops coming in on a road, you can smoke out the position and help more of your troops to get into the trenches as the enemy's attacking, or hit an enemy trench with smoke and help your attack out a little bit more. Let's see, did the Soviets have any sort of flame vehicles? I want to try to cover a few things in attacking these trenches, but it doesn't look like we have all the options that I'd like to see. This isn't Robbed, so we don't have access to every major and minor tank available. But it definitely does have a lot more here than Men of War Assault Squad did, or at least a new, fresh variety. Keep in mind, too, in this game in multiplayer, you're not looking at all the vehicles that are available in this game, nor are you looking at all the units either. You can choose between either mid or late war, and then there's doctrines that you can choose from, at least in the game mode that I chose for multiplayer. So don't judge the game on what's available just based on what you see or that you've seen here so far. Again, this is just a defensive tutorial to go over certain things to set up defenses for newer players in single-player missions, ideally. Another great weapon here is these light infantry guns. You can see the really narrow cone of fire for some of these weapons. And keep that in mind when you pick up a weapon. You should be able to see, for most parts, it's a cone of fire. You should be able to see that for machine guns. Maybe it's not installed for most vehicles, but it looks like mortars can be turned on a fly. But essentially, this is like a mix between an artillery piece and a mortar. It's kind of like a light AT gun in the sense that it's on wheels. It can be pushed around, but it really fires a little bit more like a mortar. You'll see the Germans have access to this known as a Lee gun, a lowercase LE, which is a very good anti-tank and very good anti-infantry weapon. And what the enemy can do with this is pretty devastating. As you can see, it can tear down a house quite quickly, and so we can level an obstacle in our way. Another good thing to do, too, is if you're setting up a defense and you need something out of the way, use those satchel charges to literally blast it out of the way, or any of your guns, or a tank to drive through it, and then you can set up your anti-tank barriers this way and face towards the river, too. But essentially, this is really all I can think of covering for now. I want to come back and cover this in great detail, but if you've been enjoying the beta, again, you won't have access to any of this, as this is an exclusive version that me and a few others have gotten because of our experience, I would assume, with the previous games. But also, it's a good opportunity for everybody to get excited for more to come. Now, you should be able to play that Moscow defensive mission on the open public beta, and we'll be probably doing this again when we have access to the full game. Even I don't have access to all the missions yet, but I played most of them that are currently available, and I like what I see, and I can't wait to see and show you more. Alright, well, that was a crash course in this game. I'm sure I missed a lot, so if you have any other tips, make sure you share below. There's a lot of things that we didn't cover on purpose for time, but I think the basics of what you can do currently have been covered, and there's much more. This is a game that is very easy to play in terms of very, very easy to learn, but very difficult to master with many different mechanics that you'll have to master through playing it time and time again. So if you'd like to, again, feel welcome to play the skirmish mode if you get access to the full game, or to continue to play the scenarios on easy until you learn, and then you can up the difficulty each time until you're a true professional, which you can never be because there's always something to improve on the field of battle. Thank you, everybody, for subscribing. Thank you very much for smashing a like on the way out. And again, please do give me some other tips to share with others down below, and I'll see you all very soon. Thanks again, and goodbye.